Today's episode is brought to you by the letters Love. And what does that spell? Love. And why am I talking about love? Because if you love what I'm doing with Wise Squirrels, you will drop by wisesquirrels.com/love. I love you so much, I included a link right here in the podcast description that you can just click the link and visit the page to find out how you can spread a little love to a certain Wise Squirrel. Welcome to Wise Squirrels, the podcast for late diagnosed adults with ADHD. I'm your host, Dave Delaney. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you'll know that I have a hard time using planners. These are great books oftentimes, and they're well designed and well thought out, and they're awesome systems. However, they don't work for me. And this was a realization I had with my therapist a while back when I asked her why they don't work for me. And she simply said, Dave, your brain doesn't work that way. And I'm like, oh, okay. It used to be that I would get so frustrated with these different planners. You know, I'd hear such great feedback. I'd watch the videos about them. I'd read about them. I'd buy them and I'd hold on to them and carry them everywhere I go and sit down, unplugged, coffee, pen, book. And I'd open the book and I couldn't even write my name in it. And now having made that realization, I know, okay, that's okay. That's not how I work. And the truth is, what happens is I get overwhelmed with the process and I end up spending way too much time thinking about it rather than actually using it. And again, it's not to fault myself. That's just how I work, or don't work in that case. I share that with you because, of course, your results may vary, but I have come up with something that does work. This is something new that I've been doing. I'm calling it the Daily Dave. But, of course, you can call it what you like if you decide to try it for yourself. Also, if you email me, dave@wisesquirrels.com, feel free to email me there and ask me for a copy of this, and I'm happy to email you one. So I'll explain it so that way you can have an idea here. So I've created this using Google Sheets. On the top left, I have day. So what day of the week is it? Then the date. Then I have a series of letters that equal different things. For example, W equals work, H equals health, B equals business development. I have dollar signs, a series from 1 to 3 on understanding what work I'm doing that will actually generate the most money because I have a business and a family to feed. The C equals cook or clean. Basically, it's housework. The S is socialize. The F is family. And then WS for Wise Squirrels. Next line down, I have category. So these are in columns. I have category, time, task planned, task outcome, reward, or notes. Under the category, that's where I will put the letter representing whatever it is that I'm planning to do. W for work, for example. Then I have the times broken down from 6 to 7 a.m., 7 to 8 a.m., and so on, all the way down to 6 to 7 p.m., and then evening. Then under the task planned, for example, 6 to 7 a.m., I have stretch and planning. Stretch meaning actually get on my back and on my belly on the floor and do the stretches that I know I need to do. After that, it's planning my day, which is ultimately filling this form out, although ideally doing this the day before or the night before makes sense. Next, I have category, and now we're moving into the second section of this form or this sheet. The second section is category, and this goes in line with what the task was that I actually did. So in theory, if I stretched and planned from 6 to 7 a.m., then I really don't need to update anything here. That's what I did. But if I got distracted and did something else, I need to write it in this box. And I need to add the category that is associated with that. The other columns, as I mentioned, I've got reward and notes. So just to reward myself if I do something well, it's important to recognize when we do good things. And so rewarding ourselves is important. That might mean just going to buy a coffee. It might mean going for a hike, going to a movie, whatever it is. Now, for my version of this, I have a column for money earned also, so I can keep track of when I'm actually getting paid for the work that I'm doing. Of course, if you work for somebody else, this isn't really important. But for me, working for for myself and having my own business, obviously revenue is important. So your head may be spinning by listening to me right now, or you may be nodding like, this is a good idea. This has really been working for me because I can look back and see what I did and what I actually, like what I planned to do, and then what I actually did. And I can see by the category letters, I'm updating this sheet so that I'm going to add a place where I can total the score. So for example, I can have maybe I have one health planned each day, but I do 3. Well, then it's 3 healths. So that way, ultimately what I'm trying to do here is keep track of what I'm doing in a day. And it's not to beat myself up if I go off script or if things go sideways. That's not the intention here. The intention is to celebrate, first of all, that I'm getting organized and I'm using this sheet to do it. So that's one point that is worth celebrating. Another point is to see, wow, I'm spending a lot of time on Wise Squirrels, which I am. And I love what I'm doing here, and I hope you do too. I receive your emails and I see your reviews, and obviously I sincerely appreciate all of that. And yeah, so anyway, that's enough of a pre-ramble, but I wanted to share this with you. And again, I do have a copy if you would like. Just email me, dave@wisesquirrels.com, and ask me for this, and I will send you a copy, and then you can kind of fill in the blanks yourself and give it a whirl. So I'm printing out these pages daily. And again, sort of in the evening, what I'm trying to do, or even at the end of the workday, is to plan the next day. I did it on Saturday too, but I didn't do it on Sunday because Sunday we were camping. And I also think it is good to have a day of rest and give yourself a bit of a break. And so maybe that's Sunday for you, where you can skip filling anything out and watch Netflix or mow the lawn or whatever it is that you have to do. So with that, I'm going to get on with the show. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. I'm not a medical professional. I don't play one on the internet or in real life, so always seek the advice of a qualified healthcare provider regarding any medical condition, including ADHD. Reliance on any information provided by this podcast is solely at your own risk, so just go talk to your doctor first. Today I'm speaking with Matthew Sampey. Matt is a certified ADHD and life coach. He's a mental health advocate, speaker, and writer, and he runs Gray Wolf Coaching at graywolfcoaching.com. We kicked off the show by talking about Matt's education and what got him into ADHD coaching.
I got my undergrad and graduate degree at LSU, and I was married. I married a girl that I met in Baton Rouge after LSU. We had known each other, but unfortunately, I'm going through a divorce right now of 23 years, but I married into her family business, and I moved to Alexandria, Louisiana. So I was there for 17 or 18 years running an interior design store. And it was a big store. It's a great little store. But that divorce, as things started not doing well, then I started my own business. I had a lot of questions about this. I hired an ADHD coach myself. I got a lot of clarity. Then I moved back to Baton Rouge because I had been here for a while, and I knew a lot of friends, and my family is from down here, and they're still Baton Rouge is a lot closer to New Orleans. So, and that's kind of where I am, and kind of ended up here. So happy to be back.
And you were diagnosed with ADHD at 42. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. So yeah, tell me what led to that. And was that related to your divorce and things, or is that something different?
Right. It's a good question. I'm sure that the ADHD had something maybe to do with my ex-wife and I's relationship. I think it's a lot deeper than that. Some other things, but um, I was really, of course, I'm 53 years old right now, so I was divorced. I was diagnosed 11 years ago. So when I was younger, there was no ADHD diagnosis. There was, this came about in the mid 90s before we even knew or could put our finger on it. So I have spent a lot of my life, a lot of my adult life, struggling with focus and struggling to stay on top of things and complete task. All the executive functioning things. Part of the brain. The organization, the prioritization, all these things. And I noticed that, and it really came to a head when I turned 40, and I was like, okay, I have to have something done. And I was fortunate enough to have a brain scan done by Dr. Daniel Amen. And I don't know if you're familiar with him, Dave, but he's kind of a pioneer in the research and on the brain and ADHD. Now, I do know I'm going to have to put a little asterisk by Dr. Amen that he hasn't shared a lot of his research to other fellow researchers and physicians. And so there's some that he's a little bit of a questionable uh, source. But anyway, I do think there's some good we can take from him because he did an image of my brain, and a doctor walked in and said that my prefrontal cortex was dark and black. So not a whole lot of activity, but he said my limbic system, which is the fight or flight response part of the brain, was lit up like a firecracker. And he said, has anybody told you that you have an ADHD brain? And I said, well, no, but I'm told that I've, lack focus my entire life. So there was my first diagnosis, and it was actually through a picture of a brain, my brain, and which fascinated me. And that we could be at that level now where, biologically we can start to really hone down and see what's going on in our brains.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me. I studied improv comedy with Second City in Toronto, and so I've performed. I do a lot of public speaking for a living and corporate, communication workshops and things, and a lot of it revolves, not a lot, but some of it certainly revolves around using improv. And I brought up improv because there's a great TED talk by a Dr. Kim. And I can't remember his full name, but where they studied brains using the fMRI machines of jazz musicians. And when a jazz musician starts to improvise, the results are pretty fascinating. It kind of lights up all the other sections of the brain that aren't being used typically when you're playing sort of sheet music or standards. So as soon as you start improvising, it triggers other parts of your brain, which obviously not a doctor. So I would, guess sections and probably screw them up. But yeah, no, so it is pretty fascinating, but I'm not actually familiar with Dr. Daniel Amen. So I'll have to take a look at.
Yeah, he's done a lot of shows. He's done some PBS specials. He comes on and he talks a number of times. I've seen him on his public broadcasting stations, but he's written a couple of books, and he's fairly well known in the field. Mm-hmm. But like I said, there are some, after I did some digging, there was some, he hasn't been completely forthright with sharing his information. So I can't just say, go get everything Dr. Daniel Amen has done. I would like to see a little more of why he's kind of been a little bit, not as open as we'd like to see in the field, So before I just give him a rubber stamp of approval and tell everybody to go get their brain scanned.
Right.
But I do think that he does have a lot. I mean, he's kind of been a pioneer, and if anything, we can definitely build off of what he's done.
So before this, so you were facing some sort of challenges, I imagine, before meeting with him. Had you met with like other doctors without prying into your personal medical history? I'm not doing that here.
No, not at
as much
all.
as you'd like to share. But how did you? Because obviously, I mean, his name is fairly well known by the looks of things. So how did you end up with him? And like for me personally, in my diagnosis, I haven't had an fMRI on my brain. Although I'd be curious, certainly.
Yeah, well, at that point in my life, there was a lot of change going on. We were very busy with work and kids and all, and I found my life. And I really don't mind going into this, Dave, because I'm pretty open about this. I think that sharing this kind of information is really important for everyone, because ADHD, we feel really isolated sometimes, and I think that being open with it and being very honest and vulnerable is a real plus for me, and for not just for me, but for many other people. But I like to talk about it as well. I think that there's nothing that going to hold me back from anything from my past that I've discussed as far as my medical issues are concerned. But to answer your question, I think that I was feeling overwhelmed, and it's very hard to describe, but it's something easily happened to the ADHD brain. We just feel like everything's coming at us at once, and it's very hard to even put one foot in front of the other when we get like this. And I couldn't think. I couldn't. It was hard for me to even function at this point, and I had ruminative thoughts, looping pattern thoughts, and I couldn't cycle out of them, and I had no answers, and I knew it was something with some type of mental issue I had going on, and I just started trying to research more. And when I finally got that diagnosis from psychiatrists and other subsequent psychiatrists after that brain scan, then I really started to do a deep dive into ADHD, and it answered so many questions for me, and it actually led me to what I'm doing now, which is an ADHD coach.
Yeah, and you started Gray Wolf coaching. What's the significance of the Gray Wolf?
Oh, it's a question I get a lot. It's the gray wolf. I'm an outdoors guy. I mean, I love outdoors. I love animals, and I love exercising outdoors. So the gray wolf is like one of the most persecuted animals on the history of the planet. But he's extremely resilient. They can live in deserts, or they can live in the Arctic, and they're incredibly intelligent and cunning, great hunters. Of course, the American Indians studied them for years, because they were such great hunters, and they would, emulated a lot of what they did. A fascinating creature, monogamous. Of course, they could teach humans that a little bit better, I guess, even my own self. But so there's a lot to take from them, and but I think the main thing that drew me to them was the symbolism behind the resiliency of them, and they've been through a lot, and they just keep adapting and moving on. And I like that, and I've read books on them, and I thought it was just a natural thing for my coaching. It's very me, So and thanks for the question. I kind of like talking about it.
Yeah, it's great. It's great, and that all makes so much sense. From it's interesting too, from the animal analogy, being the host of the Wise Squirrels podcast and wisesquirrels.com. All the, for me, it was very much the squirrels thing, and then the wisdom that comes with age. So I love the gray wolf. I love the gray wolf.
Yeah. And then the lone wolf, people like, you hear the term lone wolf. Well, he does leave the pack.
Mm.
Okay, but he doesn't leave the pack to be a loner. He leads the pack. He leaves the pack because he wants to be a leader,
Yeah.
and he wants other wolves to follow him.
Mm.
And there's a lot of symbolism behind that as well. So it's not like, we don't need to be isolating with these things. We all need support. We need leaders, and I like that interesting part as well.
So growing your practice, so you've been a coach now for, was it 3 years of coaching?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's great. And tell me a little bit about growing your practice. What are some of the challenges you've faced, some of the things that you've overcome in kind of building your own practice?
Yeah, yeah. Well, Dave, I think the big challenge is just really describing to people what I do.
Mm.
It's a relatively new field, and so it's not like I'm a social worker or a counselor or a therapist. Those they're a little similar, but they're different. So it's kind of a newer field, right? And hasn't been around long. And particularly in Louisiana, I'm one of four that I know of ADHD coaches, right? And like just to, for instance, in New York State, there's 500,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
So you can't really account for it because of population either, because the population of New York State is a little under 20 million. Louisiana's a little under 5 million.
Mm.
Well, you have 500 coaches and four, and that's not really a true rate of comparison between the two, right?
Yeah.
So why is that? And that's a good question, and I don't know the answer, the complete answer to it but um, Louisiana, we're kind of a little bit behind the times. I don't want to talk bad about my home state, but we don't usually lead the country in the best rankings of things. So maybe it's just that we're a little slower to get on board. But it is the challenge that I face is just having people really understand what I do. And because they say, everybody knows what a coach is. A lot of people have an idea what ADHD is. They don't really necessarily have heard those two words together.
Mm.
So it's the one thing I have to do is explain to people what I'm doing, not so much, exactly, like what is it? What is that? So it's getting that word out, that there's help and support available for executive functioning issues for, high school students, college students, executives, CEOs, attorneys, small business owners. I mean, it's of course, ADHD is very, very prevalent out there. Of course, some estimates say 9% of the population, and and 80% of people are not diagnosed.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it might even be a little more than 9% of the total population. So there's a lot of people, millions of people just in America that are really suffering in silence, really, so to speak. They don't really understand what's going on either. And that's why I'm a big advocate for people to reach out with support, right? Let's try to find some answers.
Yeah, I've learned a lot just having conversations with folks about this and realizing, for example, like learning about this for myself and finding how, when you're craving dopamine and your brain's not producing enough of it, we look for other ways to get that dopamine, and that can be good or bad. As it goes with, addiction and things like that. So I've had some interesting conversations as well around cultures and backgrounds and things like that. And I wonder if that might play a role in it. When I think of folks from Louisiana, I mean, you really are like in the most respect ever, but like you are totally, not totally, but you're your own people. You're unique in with the, with your French background and historically speaking, and then of course the best food I would maybe argue in the world comes from your neck of the woods, or neck of the swamp.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
yeah.
Neck of the swamp. I like that. I don't know if I've ever heard that before. Very apropos, though.
Yes,
I like
yes.
it. Yes. Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, I think of like I've had I had a conversation with a coach who is Hispanic and based in, I think it was El Paso. So a lot of her population and clientele are from Mexico or Mexican, and so and they're not generalizing, of course, but they're not as quick to go see a therapist. As I've found in my own experiences with Ireland and the Irish, having lived there for a while, that they too, generalizing, but they too are not so quick about going to a therapist. Just go to the pub, for crying out loud. Have a pint. Have a pint. Arthur. A little self
medication.
That's right. Arthur Guinness and his sons are waiting to help you. So, what are your thoughts to all that?
It's actually a great question. I think that right off the top of my head, while not being a sociologist and knowing this is just purely, personal opinion. Okay. That, I think that somehow this equates to, education, right? Like the more educated you are about the mind, and that's probably really like kind of proper schooling, what I'm talking about, right? And the more advanced degrees you have. If you look at the educated populace of New York and Louisiana, I would like to see that number. I don't know that number, but I bet you there's a pretty strong correlation between like the number of ADHD coaches in a certain geographic area and how educated the populace is. So not saying that, of course, look, I'm completely Cajun French myself. I'm from South Louisiana. Both my maternal parents and maternal grandparents, my maternal and paternal grandparents, not my parents, spoke Cajun French. So I know them as French-speaking people, right? So I'm very much a true blood Cajun, what they would call. But typically, we came over on a boat and we were kind of like grunts, and we kind of worked our way to where we are now, So it wasn't like this was the bastion of education in South Louisiana, It was working class people, right? And we've built a long way. So I think to answer your question it probably equates with the level of the educated populace. I'm not 100% sure with that, but I think that there would be a strong correlation there.
I recall hearing that Jamie Oliver, the famous chef from the UK, has ADHD. He's one of many, of course. And I'm curious about what your thoughts are on chefs, and maybe. And I say chefs, obviously, having mentioned earlier, the great food that comes from Louisiana, the Cajun and Creole food. And of course, I'm speaking with you before lunch, which is a shame. Now I'm really hungry. Have you had have you learned anything about that? Like, is there any correlations there? Not
great. But, I love this. This is cool what you're going into. I didn't expect us to go here, but this is really cool. This is fun. What on the chef side, okay, what are chefs, right? They're creative types, right? Aren't they? I mean, they're artists with food. Right? I mean, and that's the way I look at chefs. So look, creativity is a hallmark of ADHD. Okay. Of course, that if you know anything about ADHD, impulsivity is, it's kind of like, it's very common. And okay, what do I mean by impulsivity? I could be impulsivity in speech, like blurting out something or oversharing information. It could be impulsive shopping, spending too much money. ADDers go into a bookstore and walk out with 15 books, even though They won't read one by the end of the month, So, and so why am I talking about impulsivity? Well, there's never been anything creative that wasn't first an impulsive thought, right? So it's kind of the brainchild of creativity. And then this creativity, of course, fits right into the mold of chef, right? And not only that, I'll also add that a lot of ADHDers crave on excitement, right? We want stimulation to the brain. We we like putting out fires, like we like problems that require adrenaline, right? It gets our brain moving. And what better to do that into a major kitchen at dinner time, right? When the chefs are going wild, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like that brain, like the emergency room physicians we see ADHD, right? Same type of environment, right? Where we're constantly being stimulated and we don't have to worry about getting bored. Of course, boredom is our kryptonite, right? So, like, there's a lot of similarities between an ADHD brain and the chef's brain.
Yeah, I can.
But,
I can see that. I can see that completely. I also I've worked in a restaurant as a cook and as a server several times over the years, and never a chef, but certainly as a cook. And it just completely makes sense. The adrenaline you feel working in the kitchen. If anybody has not listened or watched, have you watched The Bear yet?
I have. I watched the first season.
Okay.
I watched it. Yeah. So absolutely.
And for folks, with ADHD listening or out of interest, I absolutely love that show. By the way, I'm a kind of a film nerd, and it's so.
I'm
good.
a little bit of a film nerd myself. It's funny you say that, but
really?
I did really enjoy that show. Yes.
Yeah, they perfectly capture the intense insanity that is working in a kitchen in a restaurant. Absolutely. And the second season's great as well. No spoilers, of course. Okay, so tell me, from the clients that you've served over the years and the research you've done, what, if someone's listening right now who thinks they have ADHD, or maybe someone who has been diagnosed with ADHD, what are some tips that some advice you would give them?
Well, I think I have to put a little asterisk here, Dave, that, that really every person is very different in how it presents itself. I know we can kind of talk about distractibility, impulsivity, hyperactivity, sensitivity, and emotional dysregulation, and executive functioning issues, but every really person is very individual. And so when I meet them, we're working through okay, how is ADHD affecting your life right now? And what do you really want out of a coach, right? And then we figure out, this is what we want. And of course, that's very different to every individual person. But we first have to find out what they really, really want, right? And that's what I would suggest to people is so many ADHDers are in careers or in relationships that don't serve them, right? It's not who they are, the capital WHO, right? So I suggest that people really try to find out who they are. What do they value? What makes them tick, right? And I say that because I think with the neurodiverse crowd and ADHD, or anybody with executive functioning levels, sometimes we can really struggle with that, right? So I'll get people that look me up, and the first thing I want to know is what do you want, right? Like, what do you want out of your life, right? Those are big questions, right? And I really suggest people do a deep dive into this and to really write out, like, if I could live my best life, what would it look like, right? And once we have that idea of what they really, really want, Okay. Because I say really, really twice because ADHDers want everything a lot of time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and they're interested in everything. But there are some things that we are really, really interested in, right? And that's the first thing I want to do is I want to find out where you want to go. And once we find out that, then that clarity provides us some motivation to move forward. Okay. So how are you going to be motivated, Dave, for a job that you're kind of half in, half out on? Right? I need to find something that lights you up, right? And that I don't have to beat you over the head to get you out of bed in the morning. So once that clarity is found in your strength of purpose and who you are, then we can move towards other executive functioning skills and let's like the nuts and bolts of trying. So the first big thing is to find out, where we're going, right?
Yeah. Are there ways? What are some tips that you recommend, or strategies that somebody can do to better understand themselves and what those wants are, those goals?
Yeah, well, they basically it's I would give them like a values exercise for one. Okay, like what do you really value? And there's ways that you can go through it to looking at separate words, and you'll even like have a list of let's say 100 values, and there's exercises where you go and you take those values and you really pare it down to a core 7 or 8, right? And also the same thing with strengths, right? I want to find out what your real strengths are. So there's a character strengths assessment, like, and I think people can go online. The VIA character strengths is I think it's free too. If they go online and Google VIA character strengths assessment, they can do it, a quick little test, and it'll come back with the top 5 strengths that you have. And that could be, whatever, creativity, humor, and you get these things that you're like, oh, yeah, I am pretty good at that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And because we naturally are pulled toward our strengths. Right. So once you get this values down, once you get these strengths down, you can start to try to start weaning away things that you don't want to do. Right. So it's almost like this process of elimination to get to where you want to be. Also, I'm a big writing guy. I really, our brains with ADHD, we all have this cognitive hyperactivity, right? You hear the word hyperactivity and we think of just the physical part of it. But if you have ADHD, you have cognitive hyperactivity. Okay. Like there is no way you don't. You think and you think hard and you're probably thinking too much, right? Like, and so what I'm trying to do is to get you from thinking to action, right? That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to move you from the limbic system, which is the fight or flight, to more prefrontal cortex, right? More that's the executive functioning part of your brain, the task management, the task initiation, the task completion, the focus, the organizing, the scheduling, all these things that we struggle with. So having that plan and going ahead is how we can get going with the executive functioning and increase that side, increase your activity, increase your action, right?
Mm.
And so we pare it down, we pare it down, and we pare it down, and then we have a solid goal, and then we can find the motivation because you have your strengths, so you have what you value, and then now what else is holding us back? And quite frequently, a coach is, what we're doing. We all develop these stories and paradigms like for our life because they fit cleanly in these little boxes, Dave. I mean, it's like, we all have these ideas of how to live our life and what it is and our clean definitions. The problem with it is, Dave, our stories sometimes are not right.
Mm.
You know, like we believe things that are not correct. And when a client of mine starts talking, and I won't tell them they're wrong, right? And I'll kind of repeat what they say and just be silent. And they say, I don't think that this sounds very correct. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I am not always this way, right? This all or nothing thinking, this cognitive distortion talk that we hear so much of. So many of our stories are wrong about who we are, about what the world is, right? So it takes almost us to verbally process that to a coach, and a coach to listen to that and to point out where maybe there's some inconsistencies in what the thought is.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And the change, and why would somebody be hesitant to look at their story? We don't like change, Dave. We it's
Mm-hmm.
very uncomfortable. You know, for us reprogramming the way we see the world, it's kind of stressful. So we have this internally. We don't want to go inside and look at these big questions because it brings up anxiety for us. And we're trying to avoid anxiety at all costs. I mean, ADHDers are very familiar with avoidance tendencies. Like we avoid things. I mean, we play on our phones, we play games on our computers, we watch Netflix, we zone out. We know how to avoid what we have to be doing. You know, we gamble, we drink, we, you know, all these avoidance tendencies to facing what we really need to face. And a lot of what coaching does, Dave, is to get you to look at these uncomfortable feelings and kind of step towards them and stop running away from them.
Yeah, and you
Right?
start to get a better understanding of yourself, as you said, you know, your strengths and
Absolutely.
values and what you can contribute to the world. And then, you know,
Hmm.
I believe there's a level of sort of self-respect and self-acceptance that has to come as
Mm.
well.
Mm.
Have you found any strategies to help with that?
You know, actually, I did a lot of work on my own, Dave, and the self love
Mm-hmm.
is really kind of cliche. It's like you hear it all the time now, but really, you know, when you've been told that you're wrong for so many years with ADHD in this neurotypical society, you know, to say that it has an effect on the shame and guilt you may feel. I mean, a lot of my clients are really holding a negative opinion of self when they come. So really, I focus on this getting better with yourself part. And I don't know if you're familiar with Tara Brach.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
I recommend her readings, and she does a lot of self love work. You know, meditation in any kind of way that you can give your brain a break from the constant thoughts that are running through it. That as well. But I'm a big proponent of this self love, self acceptance part of it, right? And actually, it is the foundation of my coaching. I use it as the slab of everything else. If we don't have that self acceptance and self love, we don't have anything. We can't do anything. We will not be able to love if we don't have it for ourselves. You cannot give what you do not have, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's so important. And so there is a lot of work, a lot of times that has to be done in that area. And we'll work with certain, Tara Brach has these meditations, and she's written a couple of books that I recommend. And, it's really important. I'm very glad you brought that up, because that would have been a big missing if I didn't even talk about that at all,
Of
because it is the
yeah.
foundation of everything that I do.
Of her
Yeah.
books, you know, she's got, you know, radical acceptance and
Yes.
radical self acceptance, which was a different book. But the most, I think her most recent was radical compassion. And is there one that stood out to you most that you found most helpful?
I haven't read Radical Compassion yet, but I did reach that radical self acceptance.
Okay. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and I've heard her. She has a lot of YouTube videos, and Um, you know, I even I was like, an ADD, so I dove deep into this whole side of it, Dave. I got into Pema Chodron, who is basically a Buddhist nun,
Mm-hmm.
and she's written a couple of great books on, looking at yourself and just looking into the suffering and stepping into it instead of running away.
What was her name?
Pema Chodron. It's Chodron, I think her last name is. But Things Fall Apart, I think she wrote, which I loved. She's on the Buddhist side of it. Of course, I'm a Christian, but I'm very open to other faiths. And, I'm kind of one of these guys that thinks we're all trying to get to the same place,
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of disappointed people at the end of things to find out they were with the wrong team. Like, oh man,
exactly.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Buddhist.
I know.
Should have known.
Yeah, exactly. No, but her book, The Places That Scare You, I love.
Mm-hmm.
And When Things Fall Apart.
Yeah.
Those two books, what I said earlier about us walking into our uncomfortableness, right? And just being with it instead of trying to run from it. There's a lot of wisdom in that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like us, we have to stop avoiding, and we have to step into this uncomfortableness. And a lot of times, Dave, when we step into it, we realize that it wasn't this big bear that we built it up to be, and that is such a big, that is such a thing to learn. And as you're growing with self, and to realize that, wow, that is just another big story that I told myself about this and this and this. And it just wasn't as bad as I made it out to be. Why didn't I step into it years ago?
Is there, as far as community goes, any tips around ADHDers kind of finding one another? Because it can be especially lonely when you realize that you have ADHD. I mean, you mentioned yourself how many people are out there who are undiagnosed and don't even realize it. But I do find that in my short time here, that ADHDers tend to kind of gravitate towards one another. But are there any ways to kind of help cure sort of this loneliness epidemic that we're facing in a way to kind of bring folks together? I'm hoping to do some meetups for Wise Squirrels, when I travel, kind of, try to encourage people to get out and
oh man, you were speaking to such an important part of this. And unfortunately, we have a long way to go. Now, CHAD is a large national organization I'm sure you're familiar with. They have different support groups in cities at CHADD.org. That's children and adults with ADD. Large. If you go to their website, they usually have support groups. ADA is another large organization, ADDA. That's Attention Deficit. Is it the association? But they also have online meeting places, and I do think they do some in-person stuff.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in person. I think, especially post-pandemic, I think we're all kind of tired of looking at webcams.
Me too. So that's ADD.org is another resource they do a really good job of trying to get people together. I am also a big believer in in-person meetings. I think that I just think they're more effective. I think, and really when you get ADDers together, Dave, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
You find these similarities, and I don't know if everyone and all your listeners know, but they're good-hearted people. They're sensitive types. They're very caring, and they understand what you're going through. Maybe not exactly. I mean, but they have their own issues. And like when you get us together, like for the international conference, but when you get all of us together talking, it's really, it's really special. I mean, it really is. It's because we're almost like brothers and sisters, because we start talking and everybody's like, oh my, and heads start shaking up and down. It's like, oh yeah, me too. And that power of connection is real. And I'm a big believer in it. And I'm glad you brought that up as well.
Yeah. I just think it's so important to meet one another. Back in the early days of Twitter or X or whatever it's called now, we used to do tweet ups. When I would travel, I would just plan tweet ups and meet up with your Twitter friends back when Twitter was not the cesspool burning dumpster that it is now.
Oh my God. Whatever. Yeah, I know.
Yeah. But no, this has been really great, Matt. Is there anything that I didn't mention or ask you about? Anything else that I didn't touch on that you'd like to mention?
No, I think, like, if anything, I would like to say that for people to speak up and reach out. One of the things that I've found with ADHD is it can be very isolating, as you said. And ADDers kind of like, we want to kind of do it on our own, so to speak. We don't like really being told what to do. And it took me a long time to learn that side of it out, that actually by reaching out for support, that's a step of growth in itself, like knowing how to ask for help, right? So, that's what I would implore your listeners to do. If you're struggling maybe with focus or, of course, the comorbidity, we haven't even talked about anxiety and depression, that was so prevalent with ADHD, right? Mm-hmm. And I struggled with that for most of my life myself because I didn't understand my ADHD. But if you reach out for support, reach out for help, know that there are people that think and feel like you. You're not alone, and I implore people to do what it takes to contact, whoever it may be, maybe your local physician, to maybe get a proper diagnosis. Tell them that, look out, go to Chad, go to ADA, and seek out a support group. So that's one thing I would say is don't suffer in silence. Like that first step to support is your first step to a new life, and sometimes we need help, and don't be afraid to ask for it.
That's great advice. Thank you, Matt. How can folks get a hold of you and learn more about your work?
Of course, I'm Grey Wolf Coaching, www.greywolfcoaching.com. That's GREYWOLFCOCHING.com. I also on Instagram, Grey_Wolf_coaching. And they can reach me at my website. They can shoot me an email. And I'd love to talk to you. If there's anything I can help you with or direct you to support, please reach out to me. I know a lot of other coaches. I specialize in college students and adult executives, but I do know a number of great coaches that do younger children, that do, like from 5-year-old and up, so they start very young. Mm-hmm. So if anybody just reaches out to me, I'll be happy to help you any way I can.
Matt, this has been awesome. Thanks a million for joining me. This has been really helpful.
Oh man, it's been my pleasure. Thanks for having me on, Dave. Thanks for doing what you do and spreading this. This is just another voice of a promise to so many people,
Hey, thanks a million for listening to the podcast today. It is awesome to have you here. There's a thing about being a content creator that without feedback, it's hard to know how things are going. So I've included a survey plus our brand new Patreon and more available at wisesquirrels.com/love. Head over there now. Let me know how I'm doing. And hey, if you like what you hear, maybe chip in a few bucks. I've got more great content in store for you, and I'm excited to share it soon. Stay tuned. And don't forget to follow the show and leave a review. We'll talk to you again soon. Thanks.